Well, they did not. So racism can be used there, and Governor Meacham talked about it in sort of a left-hand way, saying, well, the president would have to get to know these people. I remember in the Jackson campaign, that was one of the most racist states when the people were trying to provide security for Jesse there, and he stayed all night in some fellow's house. The fellow didn't get his house burnt down. He probably would have today. That was back in the 80s when Jesse was running. So this whole situation in West Virginia, that is an interesting historical thing. If you go back to Hubert Humphrey, he was able in West Virginia to do very well in the primary there against overwhelming, as they say, odds in that particular primary where he was running, and he later in 1968 lost a very narrow election to Richard Nixon. Hubert Humphrey was a reformed mayor out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, went to the Senate, and then became the vice president of Lyndon Baines Johnson. So that was his history there. But he was handicapped some by money. The AFL-CIO finally came in. But it was a time of the Vietnam War, and Humphrey had to break with the president on the war. He broke late, and there was also the rebellions at the Chicago Convention. Mayor Daley the First was in charge there and came down very brutally on anti-war protesters. We remember that very vividly. People bleeding, etc. There in the city of Chicago. So that stood out there, and people remembered it. So thus the Democratic Party, was splintered in the '68 election, but Hubert almost pulled it off. Very, very close indeed. But since that time, many of the states, Texas for instance, have moved Republican. They were already right of center. West Virginia had been a stable Democratic state even while Bill Clinton ran. He was able to carry West Virginia, but they would not vote for a person of color, Barack Obama. That became very, very clear there in West Virginia, and that is what the Moore Capito is doing as much as she can now to stay afloat and represent the 1%. And Natalie Tennant is driving away. She had a good debate here in our opinion. Of course, we support Natalie Tennant. We tell people exactly where we stand in these elections, so you don't get a situation where this is quote-unquote bipartisan, whatever Mickey Mouse ideas that these people have. But in the states at this point in time that are or will be turnout elections, Florida is one. Pennsylvania is a little bit different time. This will be a turnout, but the Republican governor there is far, far behind. Ohio, there's no movement there at all with Fitzgerald. As far as that governor's race in Ohio, it was very promising at one time because they fought back right to work. But you go like to Wisconsin, that is a turnout election there with Scott. Scott's been slightly ahead, slightly behind. So in other words, he's sticking around there, and he appeals to the rural vote, which Wisconsin is a rural state when you leave Milwaukee and, of course, go to their intellectual hub, Madison. Remember that in the 80s, going there to lecture at the university, and later going to Marquette University. So been there many times, that particular state. Mary Burke is running a good campaign. She just doesn't necessarily have the money now. It will again be a turnout situation. If they can get the same kind of numbers when they were able to carry Wisconsin for President Obama in 2012. You have to remember, Wisconsin's basically a working class / farm state there with a large African American population in Milwaukee, a city of more than 600,000. A little bit a different situation there. Whereas when you go to Michigan, the Motor City, etc., African Americans are there. It moves on turnout, but also you have to understand in Michigan, a large working class and rural population that is the base of the Republican Party in Michigan, and they have been as one would say, treading on dangerous waters around there for a very, very long time. And I was not surprised when Michigan went to a right-to-work state there with Snyder, who we used to deal with at the Gateway Computers. He ran a crappy company and put out a crappy product. But the people fell for his situation. He's a multi-millionaire, and his operation put Detroit on the administration. And then, of course, they went bankrupt, and Mr. Orr is there, and now it's back to the city of Detroit. And they now have a great white father for their mayor in the city of Detroit. So, in other words, the electorate, or parts of the electorate there, have fallen down. Not surprising at all. What has happened in the city of Detroit, a much neglected city, a city by the corporate interests, not by the people of Detroit, but it's been gutted of its tax base. A lot of it moved out to suburban areas there, and you still have Flint, that's Michael Moore's hometown, still struggling. They were a manufacturing state, and had it not been for President Obama and his rescue of the automobile industry sector, that would have been bye-bye Detroit, bye-bye Michigan, because not only would they lost Chrysler and GM, and it would have been cut, diced, but they'd have lost their supply chain, which has been Toyota, Nissan, and etc. across the board there. And then those plants would have been going into the South and other parts of the Midwest, and perhaps into Canada and even into Mexico. So that's kind of the situation that the people of Michigan face. Peters is running pretty well there in Michigan. So we're going to have a lot of races. We'll be looking at these in 2 weeks to see where they are. It'll be interesting if we get some polling out of West Virginia, if those numbers will move any for Natalie Tennant and what the Democratic Party in West Virginia can do. Now, Matcham has a good machine there that can turn out votes. If you recall, Capito ran against him, and Capito came out on the short end of the stick. But that's a little bit different situation than a woman in a male-centric West Virginia. This will do it for us. On to the debate, and we'll hear from Mr. Buckley, the Libertarian candidate. Good day, and we shall talk to you later.
The 2004 U.S. senatorial debate between Republican Congresswoman Shelley Moore Capito and Democratic West Virginia Secretary of State Natalie Tennant. This debate is sponsored by AARP, the West Virginia Press Association, West Virginia Metro News, and West Virginia Public Broadcasting. Here is your moderator, Hoppy Kercheval.
Good evening, and I'm pleased to welcome you inside the Walker Theater at the Clay Center for the Arts and Sciences for this 2014 United States Senate debate. Tonight's event is presented by AARP and the West Virginia Press Association and its member newspapers in partnership with the Metro News Radio Network and West Virginia Public Broadcasting. And we welcome our viewers on C-SPAN tonight. During the next 60 minutes, you'll have an opportunity to hear from the Democratic and Republican candidates for the United States Senate in their own words, as we discuss many of the issues important to West Virginians and their families. Tonight's debate includes an opportunity for you, the voters, to engage in the discussion on social media by using the hashtag WVSenateDebate. By way of formal introduction, seated to my left is Secretary of State Natalie Tennant, the Democratic candidate for the United States Senate seat currently held by retiring Senator Jay Rockefeller. Secretary Tennant was sworn in as West Virginia's 29th Secretary of State in 2009 and re-elected in 2012. She's a Marion County native, and she attended WVU, where she earned her bachelor's and master's degrees and represented the school as the first female mountaineer. Prior to her election as Secretary of State, she worked in West Virginia television broadcast media for more than a decade and was a co-owner of a video production and media training firm she operated with her husband, West Virginia State Senator Eric Wells. They are the parents of a daughter. To my right is Congresswoman Shelley Moore Capito, the Republican candidate. Congresswoman Capito is serving in her 7th term as U.S. Representative for West Virginia's 2nd Congressional District, a seat she was first elected to in 2000. A Marshall County native, Congresswoman Capito attended Duke University and the University of Virginia. She's a senior member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the House Financial Services Committee, where she's the chairwoman of the Financial Institutions and Consumer Credit Subcommittee. Prior to her election to Congress, she served as a two-term member of the West Virginia House of Delegates, representing Kanawha County. She and her husband, Charlie, have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. To begin, each candidate will get 2 minutes to deliver an opening statement. A coin toss before the debate determined that Congresswoman Capito will deliver our first opening statement. Congresswoman Capito.
Thank you. Thank you, Hoppy. Thank you for moderating tonight's debate. And I want to thank the sponsors of tonight's debate, the West Virginia Press Association, West Virginia Public Broadcasting, and the AARP. I want to thank Secretary Tennant for being here with me. But most of all, I want to thank the viewers at home, our fellow West Virginians who are interested and want to know about the future which this election will hold in 2014. You know, West Virginia is at a turning point. For the last 6 years, our economy has been under assault by the policies of President Obama. I've traveled this state through this campaign, north, south, east, and west, seen folks who have lost their jobs, folks who are worried about losing their jobs, people that can't pay their health care premiums. People are really concerned about the future of this state. We clearly need a change in the United States Senate. I'm running to be a senator from West Virginia because I firmly believe that West Virginia's best days are ahead of us. We have an enormous, vast natural resources, and we have so many people who know the value of hard work. My West Virginia Works plan, I think, will help us reach our potential here in West Virginia. I will continue to fight for West Virginia coal. I think we need to use our natural gas resources to invigorate our manufacturing sector, and we need to make sure that West Virginia's citizens, older and younger, have the tools and the education they need for the 21st century economy. But this race is about West Virginia's future, a future whether we're going to continue to have Washington pick winners and losers, of which we're losers, or are we going to elect the United States Senator that is going to stand up and fight for us. I decided to run for the U.S. House because I believe I have the experience and the practical way of solving problems that we need in a dysfunctional Senate. And I believe that West Virginia needs to work, Washington needs to work for us, and the way to get Washington working for us is to elect a United States Senator that will get rid of the obstructionism of Harry Reid, the agenda of President Obama. I look forward to discussing these issues with Secretary Tennant in this debate tonight, and thank you very much. And I want to thank the Clay Center as well.
Congresswoman Capito, thank you. Secretary Tennant, your opening statement.
Well, thank you, Hoppy, and thank you, Congresswoman Capito, for being here, too. And most importantly, thank you to all of you at home for tuning in tonight, because this race is about you. The Congresswoman wants you to believe, as you just heard, that this race is about Washington politicians. But I'm here to tell you that this race is about West Virginia. Not President Obama, not Harry Reid. They are not on the ballot. I'm on the ballot, and Congresswoman Capito is running against me. So every time you hear the Congresswoman say something about Harry Reid or Barack Obama, I want you to ask yourself, what is she hiding? Well, she's hiding the votes that she has taken that hurt you. You know me. You know that I grew up on a farm, the youngest of 7 kids in Marion County, where we had 9 people in a house with 1 bathroom. And you know my record, too. You know that I will stand up to politics as usual in Washington, just as I have done in Charleston as Secretary of State. In 2010, when 3 Democratic elected officials tried to steal an election, I led the investigation that put them behind bars. That's right, 3 members of my own party in prison because I don't answer to a party, I answer to the people of West Virginia. And I saved money. I cut my budget, I saved $3 million and gave it back to the taxpayers of West Virginia. Now, I gave money back to the taxpayers while the Congresswoman voted to give taxpayer dollars to CEOs on Wall Street. That's right, she voted twice to give bonuses to CEOs while we were bailing out those banks. That's the difference in this race. I am proud to be endorsed by Senator Joe Manchin, Senator Jay Rockefeller, the United Mine Workers of America, the U.S. Women's Chamber of Commerce, West Virginia teachers, and AFL-CIO. I know what it's like to work a minimum wage job. I know what it's like to run a small business. I know what it's like to send a husband to war. And I'm asking to be your voice in the United States Senate.
Thank you, Secretary Tennant. Candidates, thank you for your opening remarks. By agreement of the candidates, the remainder of this evening's debate will focus on questions posed to each candidate on a rotating basis. Each candidate has 90 seconds to respond to questions posed by me, with the candidate not receiving the question having an opportunity for a 60-second rebuttal. There will be 2 opportunities per candidate to pose a 30-second challenge to the rebuttal. This challenge cannot be challenged and will be the final words from the candidates before we move on to the next question. Secretary Tennant will get our first question of the evening.
Yes.
Secretary Tennant, one of your ads famously turns off the